You spend months, maybe even years, just sacrificing sleep and sanity to reach this massive milestone.
Right,
It could
yeah.
be defending your dissertation or landing a huge promotion, maybe selling your startup. And you tell yourself that crossing this specific finish line is the key.
Exactly, the magic bullet.
Yeah, that once you're there, you'll finally feel calm, confident, and permanently happy. Then you actually do it. The champagne is popped, the congratulations roll in, but within days or even hours, that soaring pride just vanishes.
It evaporates.
It really does.
Yeah.
And in its place is this hollow restlessness, like a quiet panic about what to do next, and an immense wave of guilt. Because you feel ashamed.
Yeah.
You just got exactly what you wanted, and somehow you feel completely empty.
It's a profound paradox, honestly. I mean, we are so conditioned to view achievement as the ultimate antidote to insecurity.
Right.
Yet for so many high-performing individuals, success actually triggers a depressive state. And to be clear right off the bat, this emptiness is not a personal failure.
Which is such a relief to hear, honestly.
Yeah, it doesn't mean your ambition is toxic or that you are inherently ungrateful. It's actually incredibly normal.
And that is exactly the mission for today's custom-tailored deep dive.
Uh.
We're going to unpack why your brain basically punishes you for succeeding.
It really does feel like punishment.
It does.
Yeah.
And to do this, we're pulling from this brilliant piece of source material. It's a fascinating April 19th, 2026 article published in Psychology Today.
Yes, great piece.
Written by Dr. Elizabeth Mateer, who is a neuropsychology fellow at Harvard Medical School. And it's titled, Why High Achievers Can Feel Lost After Success.
Dr. Mateer's work is just essential here because it completely removes the moral judgment from post-achievement burnout.
Total.
She maps out how this phenomenon is actually a highly predictable neurological and, well, psychological sequence. Like, your brain is not malfunctioning when you feel lost after a win.
It's just doing what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. It is executing its biological programming flawlessly.
So to understand why the finish line feels so bad, we really have to look at what the brain is actually doing while you're running the race.
Yes, we have to look under the hood of the pursuit itself.
Because we naturally assume the joy of a goal comes from, completing it. But the hard neurobiology of goal seeking paints a very different picture.
It absolutely does. When you are relentlessly pursuing a clear outcome, you are providing your brain with its absolute favorite resource, which is rigid structure.
Oh, structure.
Yeah, a massive goal organizes your time, it directs your attention, and it gives you a definitive metric for daily progress.
Like a roadmap.
Exactly like a roadmap. By giving you that path, the goal drastically reduces environmental and emotional uncertainty, and the human brain interprets uncertainty as a profound biological threat.
So having a daily objective operates like this incredibly powerful neurological security blanket.
Spot on, yes.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if I understand the neuroscience correctly here, the actual chemical reward we get, dopamine, it isn't being released because we did a good job.
No, not at all.
It's being released because we are on a predictable path.
Precisely. We often mistakenly label dopamine as the pleasure chemical, right? Or the reward you get for finishing a task.
Right, like the gold star at the end.
But in reality, it is a molecule of anticipation. It's about forward momentum. Dopamine surges during the pursuit.
Wow, during?
Yeah, it spikes when you anticipate a reward and take action toward it. It's literally the chemical engine driving you forward.
So what happens when you cross the finish line?
Well, the moment you achieve the goal, the gap between where you are and where you want to be closes. And because there is no more pursuit required, the brain sharply cuts off the dopamine supply.
Wow. So we are literally biologically designed to make the hunt feel better than the meal.
Unfortunate, but true.
It's like how packing your suitcase and heading to the airport often feels far more thrilling than actually sitting on the beach.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Like when you're packing, your brain is just flooding your system with the anticipation of the vacation.
You're visualizing the relaxation.
Yeah. But the moment you are actually on the sand, the dopamine drops, and you suddenly start, worrying about whether you applied enough sunscreen or if you left the stove on.
Exactly. The anticipation is gone.
But I have to push back on this biological framing for a second here.
Sure, go for it.
If our brains are hardwired to only reward the chase, aren't we all just doomed to be hamsters on a wheel? Like, are we biologically destined to perpetually run and never actually feel satisfied?
What's fascinating here is that understanding the mechanics of the wheel is actually the only way to step off it.
Okay.
You aren't doomed, provided you recognize what you're actually feeling when the crash hits.
So what are we feeling if not sadness about the goal?
Well, when that post-success depression sets in, people think they are mourning the achievement. They think the promotion or the degree just wasn't enough to make them happy.
Right, like, I guess I need a bigger promotion.
Exactly. But Dr. Matir points out that we are usually mourning the loss of the structure. We're mourning the sudden absence of the organizing principle that told us exactly what to do and who we were every single morning.
Oh, wow. So the dopamine drop is just the biological consequence of losing your structural anchor.
That's exactly it.
Well, if the brain cuts off the dopamine supply and strips away our structural anchor the moment a goal is met, that totally explains why our perspective becomes so distorted.
It gets incredibly distorting.
We fall right into the trap of thinking the next goal will be the one that finally fixes us.
And psychologists actually refer to that specific distortion as the arrival fallacy.
Arrival fallacy.
Yeah, it's this deeply ingrained, pervasive illusion that reaching a specific future milestone will deliver permanent psychological peace.
Like, I'll finally relax when I make partner.
Or, I'll be confident once we hit $1 million in revenue.
It's the ultimate carrot on a stick.
It really is. And it is a deeply convincing illusion. To fully grasp why the brain cannot sustain the happiness of an arrival, Dr. Matir references the foundational concept of hedonic adaptation.
Right, hedonic adaptation.
A classic way to understand this is a landmark 1978 study by Philip Brickman and his colleagues. They wanted to test the limits of human happiness by comparing 3 highly distinct groups.
Okay, what were the groups?
First, recent lottery winners whose lives were transformed by unimaginable wealth. Second, people who had recently suffered severe, paralyzing accidents. And third, just a standard control group.
Wow, so the absolute extremes of human fortune and tragedy.
The absolute extreme.
You would expect the lottery winners to be just off the charts in terms of daily joy,
Yeah,
and the accident victims to be permanently devastated.
that is exactly what common sense would dictate, yeah. But human psychology completely defies it.
What happened?
The researchers found that despite these radically life-altering events, over time, everyone's reported happiness levels began to regress toward their original baseline.
Wait, really? Everyone's...
Everyone's. The lottery winners habituated to their wealth, and it just became their mundane reality. The accident victims adapted to their new physical constraints and found baseline contentment again.
That is wild.
Our nervous systems are designed to habituate to sensory and emotional input to maintain equilibrium. We adapt to the negative to survive, but the cruel irony is that we adapt to the positive just as efficiently.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you see this adaptation play out in corporate and academic environments every single day.
Oh, constantly.
Like, think about your own trajectory. You spend a decade obsessing over getting the corner office. The day you move your desk in, you feel like royalty. Your brain is firing on all cylinders.
You've made it.
Right, but give it 2 weeks. Suddenly, it is no longer a symbol of your triumph.
Okay.
It is literally just the room where you sit to answer stressful email.
Yes, the novelty completely evaporates.
It becomes your new baseline. And because the brain cannot sustain the initial high, it immediately starts scanning the horizon for the next target just to feel something again.
And that transition from the high to the new baseline is actually dangerous territory for a specific subset of people.
Also.
Well, if the biological baseline is always going to reset to neutral, how does a person survive if they have attached their entire self-worth to being at a psychological 10?
Oh, man.
When the thrill fades, the emotional letdown doesn't just feel like a bummer, it turns existential.
Right, because if you are a high achiever, productivity rarely feels like a conscious choice.
It really doesn't.
It operates as proof of your existence. You stop pursuing goals for the joy of the work and start pursuing them to justify your value as a human being.
And Dr. Matir highlights this as a critical vulnerability. For heavily driven individuals, accomplishment is deeply intertwined with identity.
Right.
Their internal narrative sounds like, I am capable, I am valuable, I matter because I perform.
Which is such a heavy burden to carry.
It is. And this is an incredibly common coping mechanism for perfectionists or, for individuals raised in environments where praise, safety, and affection were highly conditional on success.
Like, if bringing home a perfect report card was the only way you felt seen as a child.
Exactly. If that was the case, striving isn't just a career strategy for you. It's a lifelong survival mechanism for managing your self-esteem.
But relying on external accomplishments to feed your internal self-esteem seems like a mathematical impossibility, right?
Mm.
If hedonic adaptation guarantees the thrill won't last, you're always going to be starving.
You are. It's an impossible equation.
So how do psychologists actually measure the fallout of that impossible equation?
They look at it through the lens of self-determination theory, or SDT. This theory fundamentally splits our motivations into two categories: intrinsic and extrinsic goals.
Okay, break those down for us.
Intrinsic goals are pursuits that are inherently rewarding to you, things like personal growth, mastering a hobby, or building deep relationships.
Stuff you do just for the sake of doing it.
Exactly. Extrinsic goals, on the other hand, are focused on outward rewards: status, financial accumulation, public recognition, outward appearance.
The stuff that goes on a resume or Instagram.
Right. And SDT research consistently demonstrates that aggressively pursuing extrinsic goals correlates with significantly lower overall well-being and much higher rates of anxiety.
Because extrinsic goals don't actually feed the underlying psychological needs.
Correct. SDT outlines three core, non-negotiable psychological needs for human thriving. First, autonomy, which is the feeling of having agency and choice.
Okay, autonomy.
Second, competence, which is feeling effective and capable. And third, relatedness, which is feeling genuinely connected to others.
Autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Yes. When you chase achievement strictly for the applause or the paycheck, or to appease a demanding parent, those core needs remain completely starved, regardless of how successful you appear on paper.
I need to pause and challenge that framework for a second, though.
Sure.
Because if one of the three core needs is competence, wouldn't external achievements perfectly satisfy that?
You would think so, but
Like, if you absolutely crush a massive presentation or you double your company's sales, you've objectively proven your competence. So why does self-determination theory argue that this kind of verifiable success still leaves us empty?
well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the distinction becomes clear. Yes, doubling sales proves you are technically competent at that specific task,
Right.
but psychological nourishment requires these needs to work in tandem. Competence in a vacuum is incredibly hollow.
What do you mean by in a vacuum?
If you demonstrate competence without autonomy, meaning you are excellent at a job you secretly hate and you're doing it only to satisfy external expectations, it doesn't feel like success. It feels like compliance,
Oh, wow. That reframes the entire burnout epidemic.
doesn't it?
It's not just about working too many hours. It's about being highly competent at things we really don't care about.
Exactly. And consider competence without relatedness. You might deliver a flawless presentation and get the promotion, but if you alienated your peers to do it, or if you literally have nobody outside of work to celebrate with, that competence results in profound isolation.
Right.
Objective success does not automatically translate into psychological nourishment. A gold star on a resume simply cannot hydrate a starved need for genuine connection.
Which perfectly explains why the moment the project ends, the emotional bottom just falls out. You are left sitting in the corner office with a bunch of money, zero autonomy, and no real connections.
It's an incredibly lonely place to be.
So if these external milestones are completely failing to meet our core needs, what is the protocol when that crushing post-success emptiness finally arrives? Everything we've discussed so far is a diagnosis of the engine failure. How do we actually repair it?
Well, Dr. Mateer argues that the cure requires a radical shift in how we interpret negative emotions. Instead of treating that emptiness as a terrifying defect to run away from, we actually need to lean into it.
Lean into the emptiness. That sounds difficult.
It is difficult, but think about it. The emotional dip following a major accomplishment creates a rare, quiet space in a high achiever's life. The deafening noise of the daily grind has temporarily stopped.
True. The structure is gone.
And in that sudden silence, raw honesty can finally surface. The emptiness isn't a void. It's incredibly dense data revealing exactly what your ambition forced you to leave behind.
I imagine what gets left behind isn't pretty, though. We are talking about the collateral damage of the hustle.
Usually the data reveals grief.
Grief.
Yeah, it might be grief for the years you sacrificed to get the degree. It might reveal severe masked burnout that the momentum of the project was hiding. Very often, it exposes a glaring lack of joy, rest, and identity outside of your professional output.
But the immediate knee-jerk instinct when you feel that kind of painful emptiness is urgency.
Always urgency.
The brain says, this feels terrible, it's an emergency, I need to fix it immediately by setting an even bigger goal. You just want to jump right back onto the dopaminergic hamster wheel because the wheel is familiar.
That is the reflex. And Dr. Mateer says the single most transformative shift a high achiever can make is consciously replacing that urgency with curiosity.
Curiosity over urgency.
Yes. You must force a pause. And in that pause, you need to confront two highly uncomfortable questions.
What are they?
Whose life have I been building, and does it actually reflect who I am?
Man, that is such a vivid way to capture it. It's like a check engine light flashing on your dashboard after a grueling cross-country drive.
Exactly.
The high achiever instinct, the urgency reflex, is just slap a piece of opaque black tape over the warning light, hit the gas, and focus on the next city so you don't have to think about the engine.
Just keep moving.
Right. But shifting to curiosity means actually pulling the car over to the shoulder, popping the hood, and being willing to look at the frayed wires.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. You have to look at the frayed wires, even if it delays your next trip. And practically speaking, looking under the hood means fundamentally rethinking how you architect your daily life, rather than just obsessing over what external benchmark you are aiming for next.
So how do we actually rewire the engine? If our brains are biologically rigged to habituate to our successes, and our culture constantly pushes us to sacrifice our core needs for external validation, how do we build a life that is actually sustainable?
For that, we can look at a framework known as the hedonic adaptation prevention model, or the HAP model.
With the HAP model.
Yes. We established earlier that the brain inevitably adapts to new positive baselines, essentially numbing us to our own successes. The HAP model provides a behavioral strategy to actively disrupt and slow down that biological adaptation process.
Okay.
And the crucial secret of this model is that the solution involves absolute zero goal setting.
So what does this all mean for you as you try to implement it? How do you disrupt your brain's adaptation without just giving it a new goal to chase?
You focus on continuous, varied engagement rather than terminal achievements.
What does that look like in daily life?
The HAP model emphasizes integrating elements into your life that naturally resist adaptation. Things like dedicating time to hobbies, introducing spontaneous variety into your rigid routines, actively practicing gratitude to force the brain to recognize current value rather than future lack, and heavily investing in meaningful relationships.
I want to break down the mechanics of why that works. Why does a hobby shield us from the dopamine crash that a corporate promotion causes?
It comes down to the absence of a finish line.
Wow.
A promotion is a terminal event. You get it. The dopamine spikes, the event ends, and the dopamine crashes.
Right.
A true hobby, on the other hand, whether it's gardening, playing a clumsy rendition of the piano, or just hiking, has no definitive completion point.
Because you're never really done gardening.
Exactly. Because there is no final arrival, there is no massive dopamine crash. Instead, you get a steady, sustainable microdosing of intrinsic reward.
Microdosing reward. I like that.
The activity continuously generates minor novelties, which keeps the brain engaged without constantly raising your baseline expectations. Furthermore, relationships and hobbies inherently fulfill those core SDT needs of autonomy and relatedness that ambition usually starves.
Because there is no external metric telling you if you are succeeding at a friendship. You are just experiencing it.
Precisely.
Which means, to survive the psychological toll of ambition, you have to deliberately carve out unmeasured spaces in your life.
Unmeasured spaces, yes.
You need domains where there are zero KPIs, no performance reviews, no grades, and no audience.
Yeah.
You have to find things you are perfectly happy being completely mediocre at, simply because the act of doing them brings you joy.
And, for someone whose identity is built on excellence, intentionally embracing mediocrity in a hobby feels incredibly deeply uncomfortable.
But it's terrifying for a perfectionist.
But Dr. Mateer offers a profound concluding thought on this exact tension. She acknowledges that achievement is meaningful and valuable. We shouldn't pretend ambition is useless.
Right, we're not saying ambition is bad.
Not at all. However, relentless achievement can easily become a highly sophisticated way of hiding.
Hiding?
Yes. It becomes a socially acceptable way to postpone the terrifying questions about who you are when no one is watching, clapping, or paying you.
Wow.
The most grounding, resilient parts of the human experience occur in the spaces where absolutely nothing is being measured. If success is the only arena in your life where you feel you have value, winning inevitably becomes a very lonely, very cold experience.
That is a staggering realization.
Yeah.
Excellence is a hiding place.
It's powerful.
Okay, let's recap the architecture of what we've explored today. We started by disarming the guilt, looking at the hard neuroscience of how our brains use dopaminergic prediction errors to make us love the chase while punishing us at the finish line.
Yes, the biological trap.
Then we examined the arrival fallacy and the sheer biological power of hedonic adaptation, which basically ensures our new normal will always feel mundane.
The shifting baseline.
And finally, we deconstructed how tying our identity to productivity starves our foundational psychological needs for autonomy and relatedness, leading to that hollow emptiness.
And the ultimate takeaway here is not to kill your drive. Ambition is a spectacular engine.
For sure.
The goal is to ensure that your ambition is an authentic expression of your internal values, rather than an exhausting, unwinnable campaign to prove your basic worth to the world.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Something to process on your own when you go back to your day.
Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and your entire resume has been completely erased from the public record.
Okay.
You are strictly forbidden from telling anyone what you have achieved, what your title is, how much money you make, or what institutions you attended. When you meet a stranger, what exactly would you use to introduce yourself? What is left when the metrics are gone?
That is the real work, figuring out who you are beneath the gold stars. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and maybe just for today, leave the measuring stick in the drawer. Because when you finally reach the top of whatever mountain you're climbing, you want to actually possess the capacity to enjoy the view. We'll catch you next time.